A quick program note before today's episode. I'm hosting a free live webinar at multiple times and days this week of January 16th, 2017 for everyone in the Coaching for Leaders community. Be sure to get details and how you can register free at the end of today's episode. But before that, an important conversation today on how to support military veterans in your workplace. This is Coaching for Leaders, episode 280.
Produced by Innovate Learning, maximizing human potential.
Greetings to you from Orange County, California. This is Coaching for Leaders, and I'm your host, Dave Stachowiak. Leaders aren't born, they're made. And this weekly show gives you access to the practical wisdom that will empower you to become a better leader. And if you've been listening to the show for a bit, you may recall a couple of months ago on a past Q&A episode, I mentioned that someone had written in with a question regarding how do we do a better job in the organizations that we work in and as leaders in serving veterans. And that is something when I saw that message, I realized that that would be a fabulous opportunity to have an entire episode devoted to that. I think most of us are really excited and wanting to do as much as we can to serve the veterans that we work alongside with in organizations and also those that we lead. And I'm really thrilled today to be able to welcome a guest who has an expertise in serving veterans and is going to really help us to get even more language, actions, and perspective that'll help us to serve veterans more effectively. And my guest today is Eugenia Weiss. She is a clinical associate professor at the University of Southern California's Suzanne Dworak Peck School of Social Work. She is a licensed clinical social worker and has maintained a private practice for 18 years, working with military personnel and their families, as well as working in community mental health and administration. And she is the co-author of the book, The Civilian Lives of U.S. Veterans, Issues and Identities, and is also an author on the book, Supporting Veterans in Higher Education, a primer for administrators, faculty, and advisors. Eugenia, welcome to Coaching for Leaders.
Thank you so much, Dave, for having me. I appreciate the invitation.
I am so glad for you taking the time to speak with us today. This is such an important topic, Eugenia, as you've dedicated your career to serving veterans on and know so well. And one of the things that struck me when I was reviewing your writing is the description of your book. And the description reads, "This book looks at life after the military, considering the dual conundrum of a population benefiting from the perks of their duty, yet continuing to deal with trauma resulting from their service, and of former servicemen and servicewomen trying to fit in to civilian life in a system designed to keep them separate." And when I read that, I really zeroed in on the word separate. And I was wondering if you could tell us more about the separation.
Okay, well, first, let me clarify that the books that you mentioned are co-edited books. They're not authored books. Just want to make that clarification for the audience.
Thank you.
As far as the separation, I think you can think about it all in terms of military culture and how military culture and civilian culture are so different and so separate. The idea is that in military culture, there is, a sense of indoctrination, into a way of being and a way of life and a way of behaving and working with a unique set of values, standards, morals that is very distinct from societal values or ways of being. In a sense, thinking about worldviews, just being very different. And so once a person is, indoctrinated into that kind of culture and way of being, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to make the transition then back into civilian life that can be very much different. And what I mean by that is oftentimes unstructured and very unpredictable, inconsistent, where it can be a little bit difficult, to navigate, the two sort of worlds or cultures per se. And I think that this is maybe an area that the audience might be interested in terms of how do we help veterans, better integrate into civilian society, particularly after they've been through combat experiences or combat-related deployments, which we've seen in the last, 12 years and more. Although the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, in terms of the U.S. involvement, have been officially over, we're now just beginning to see some of the repercussions of our involvement in the Middle East, in terms of a lot of service members coming back and having to sort of renegotiate and find their ways through, civilian society, particularly if they're coming back with any kind of war-related injuries. I want to emphasize that not every service member who has been through combat will have PTSD. That is something that oftentimes I think as a society we tend to stereotype that combat veterans will, somehow be marked, for life in terms of a post-traumatic stress type of injury or suffer from some sort of mental disorder, and that is not the case. The statistics point to about 15 to 30% coming back with post-traumatic stress disorder. So I think that that's something to keep in mind, that the majority of service members do transition back and reintegrate successfully back into society, civilian society. So I think that that's important because oftentimes there's a sense that, particularly negative stereotypes that are portrayed in the media or in television, that, all combat veterans are somehow damaged and thus wouldn't make very good employees or workers. Well, it's absolutely the opposite of that, in my opinion. I think that they make wonderful employees and leaders because they come from a mindset that trains them to not only be, excellent followers and be respectful of others and be very timely and orderly and understand what it is to work in a unit, to work with other people. So highly developed, interpersonal skills in terms of, being able to be there for their fellow service members, their battle buddies, and then bringing back, into the workplace in terms of being able to work in a team. And also having an appreciation and respect for structure and authority. So I just wanted to highlight some of that because I know that they bring in these unique skills, talents, and abilities that are often downplayed or not recognized.
I so appreciate you saying that. I've had the privilege in my career a little bit to work with some military organizations and organizations that serve the military, and it is some of the best leadership development is done within the military, at least here in the U.S., of programs. And so there's so many strengths that our veterans do bring back into the civilian workforce. And to go even further on what you were saying, I'm wondering if you could tell us about some of the, and of course we should say, and hopefully everyone appreciates that, every situation is different, but I also know that there are some broad brushstrokes and some patterns that tend to emerge. I'm wondering if you could tell us about some of the patterns you tend to see with veterans and their families as they transition back from active duty into civilian life, and what tends to happen in the workplace, and also what kinds of things they tend to navigate in their home lives too.
Well, thank you, Dave. And I also appreciated your comment about looking at individual differences rather than, making broad statements and generalizations, So with that being said, so every individual is unique. So it's, very hard to sort of, typecast, that every veteran will be experiencing something along the lines. But it can be expected that there is a period of transition, a period of adjustment. And I would say that adjustment really depends on the person in terms of how long it would take and also what that looks like for that individual. But it's not uncommon to see someone go through a transition or what we call, sort of an adjustment phase, maybe a year, 2 years, post active duty service, particularly if they've seen combat. So given that sort of time frame, and it is very general because some folks could, certainly sort of reintegrate, much quicker, maybe in a couple of months or less, or some folks might take a little longer. So it really depends on the individual. But oftentimes what happens is that there hasn't been a real downtime between being deployed, let's say, and being in a combat type of situation and then being back home. Very, very different to what we've seen, in previous wars, when, our soldiers, and I use that word generically, but I mean service members of all branches, were coming home on ships and had time to sort of digest and process, their experiences, whereas now they're back home within, let's say, 48 hours. And that transition, I think, can be very difficult.
Indeed, so much complexity and a lot of variables. And I know there are many organizations that, if not have a policy explicitly, certainly are supportive of hiring veterans and helping them to make that transition. And I suspect that along with that, there also are some concerns about providing support and how to help a veteran transition, especially with the example you just mentioned of someone this is their first job coming back from active duty. And I'm wondering, is there things that organizations should be concerned about? And even more so the concern of just, my sense is there's a lot of leaders that want to help and would want to support, but don't really know what to do in that situation. And I'm just wondering if there are any best practices for either party to really support that transition, especially at the organizational level, knowing that there's someone who's just coming in who's been on active duty.
Well, I think being very good listeners, and I'm sure that your leaders are already doing this, and also being able to, ask questions, feeling free to be able to ask, well, tell me about your life experiences, tell me about, what it was like, and, wherever you were deployed, tell me about your service, and how are you doing, and just, maintaining a very, sort of positive framework and being able to talk and listen. I mean, I think that those are just some basic, human skills and qualities, and not making assumptions or going into, delving into negative stereotypes. I think it's really important to keep an open mind and also go about it like you would with any employee. Mm. Any employee that you know of that, has been in any, sort of potentially traumatic experience, they say that most people, or at least 50% of the population, will have had some sort of traumatic experience at least once in their life. And so just being very, open, questioning in a very gentle and safe way, and having the employee in mind in terms of being able to say to that person, we're really happy to have you, and we're very grateful for what you've done in terms of your service, and we're really looking forward to, having you join us, and we really welcome you, and we want you to know, or I want you to know that, I'm here for you, if you have any questions or any challenges that may come up. Just sort of being that person, that gentle sort of soul that can, that can be there. And I would say that that's true of any employee. But also being mindful that perhaps this person, if they ask for it, if they need any sort of, special accommodation, to sort of be open to it. And what I mean by that is that, maybe they're having trouble sleeping at night, and so maybe adjusting their work schedule, to times that will work for them. Also, being mindful of the space and the structure of the sort of the architecture of the office, and having them feel safe in that space. But also, it's just very important to not stigmatize them or make them feel like they're unusual or different, for their experiences, in a negative way. So I think that, those are probably the most helpful things that I can offer based on my own experience in working with veterans in my clinical practice, and as well as, researching their experiences.
One of the things I hear so clearly in that answer is just for all of us who are working alongside veterans and leading veterans in organizations is not to be afraid. And I don't mean fear as in like physical safety, but I mean fear as in fear in engaging and fear in building rapport and in asking about a person's service. And I know, just thinking about myself, there was a time that I was under the assumption that, well, I want to be respectful of a person's service and maybe there's difficult things they want to talk about, so I'm just not going to ask anything about it. And what I'm hearing from you and what I've experienced myself in more recent years is most veterans do want to engage. They do want to talk about their experiences. And yeah, there may be things they don't talk about, but us taking the time to ask and to show that care and concern like we would to anyone, it just strikes me so vividly in your response, Eugenia, of like
Wow.
the importance of all of us to do that. Am I hearing you right on that?
Yes, David. I think you said it better than I did. You did
Okay.
beautifully. That's absolutely what I was intending to say with my remarks.
Mm. And one of the reasons that I wanted you to come on the show is for all of us to have more empathy and more care for the veterans that we work alongside. Even within the organization, we may not be leading veterans, but many of us, in fact, I'd say most of us, are working alongside veterans, and don't always know how to navigate that well, or don't necessarily know how to engage. And so this is really encouraging to me in that way, that we can all have more empathy for the veterans that we work alongside with. And and to that point on empathy, I'm wondering also, for organizations that do really care about investing in veterans and hiring veterans, and there's and there's so many great organizations who do this already, but I'm wondering how can an organization make opportunities more appealing for veterans who do want to really serve veterans well?
Well, one thing is to promote what we call in higher ed, a veteran-friendly environment. So when you think about in a workplace, it looks like being able to accept their benefits, whatever benefits they have. When we think about it in terms of higher ed, and I'm going to draw the parallel here, what a veteran-friendly institution might look like is that, we're going to have policies and practices in place that, that will ensure to care for that veteran. So if they have educational benefits coming in, or if they are getting off of, unemployment benefits, or if they have other benefits from the VA, encouraging them and making sure that they are utilizing their entitlements and benefits, rather than looking perhaps down at them for utilizing their benefits, but instead encouraging them and being able to talk about that as well. And the other is, being mindful of, veteran sort of holidays and celebrating days that are important or unique or special. But that also entails having a conversation, with the veteran in terms of, what is meaningful for them, and how can the, employer make it a meaningful and welcoming experience for them. But just, the little things that count, in terms of, when Veterans Day comes around, making a big deal. It is a big deal, or Memorial Day, or understanding that, even for Memorial Day, understanding that it's not just a celebration, but it's, because oftentimes people think, oh, well, this is just, it's another holiday where I can, get the 3-day weekend and go out and party, but that there's meaning to that, and that it's important to be able to be respectful of that, and even asking the veteran, how can we support you? It's not an easy day for veterans, and so also being mindful of that some of these things that we call holidays are really to be thinking about, how can we support you, and particularly if there's also anniversaries. Some of our service members have lost their buddies on the battlefield, and so being able to be sensitive to that. If a veteran says, I can't come in tomorrow, I have a special we're having a special memorial for one of my fallen comrades, for the employer to be able to say, hey, you know what, take the day, take what you need. This is really important. So that's in a way what I mean by veteran friendly sort of policies. You would be surprised as to how insensitive, or maybe you're not surprised, but how insensitive we can be in terms of what other people's needs are or their vulnerabilities.
Indeed. And we all have the capacity to be insensitive, and certainly we all have been. And so that's part of the reason I'm really glad you're sharing this all with us. And I keep, I hear the complexity of this challenge. I mean, in some ways we could do a whole month of a series of episodes on this, of course. And I think that just goes back to the point you made earlier of the importance of engaging and asking and building rapport, so that as some of these things start to come to the surface, and that as you learn more about the people you work with and who are in your organization, you can start to do things that really do serve people well. And I know I made that assumption very poorly years ago. We have a organization I've worked with Carnegie, where a community of practice has emerged around leadership and communication skills. And someone decided years ago, when the group met in November, is rather than doing a normal meeting, is to have a meeting be dedicated to veterans. And there are many veterans in the organization that we were partnered with. And that meeting ended up being, and still is, the best attended meeting every year. It's sometimes 3 times the number of people would show up, and people were so grateful. The veterans who would show up were so grateful that someone was taking the time to really acknowledge the day, and that there was conversation about Veterans Day, and there would always be a Veterans Day speaker. And I was really surprised pleasantly of how valuable that was. And I have a greater appreciation of that now than I did. And I think there's probably an opportunity in a lot of organizations to do more of that, like you were saying.
Absolutely.
If there was one thing that you wish every business owner or hiring manager knew about as far as bringing veterans on their teams, what would it be?
Well, that they're going to be the most hardworking and the most loyal employee that they'll ever have.
And how about for colleagues? I'm wondering what you'd want those of us to know who have a colleague that we work with who's in the workplace and is a veteran. What should we know that we may sometimes overlook or be insensitive to, that we're not intending to be, but we just don't know?
Well, I think that the same advice, or the same few words of wisdom that I just gave, at least I like to think that they're wise, also applies to colleagues. That they should know that that this veteran, once you sort of get in with the veteran, where the veteran can trust you, you will have a colleague and a friend for life. That is the sort of loyalty and sort of appreciation and respect that veterans bring to an organization, to a unit, that, this person will be there for you when you need them. They may not necessarily be very expressive emotionally, to tell you how much they like you or love you or appreciate you. They may not necessarily be very wordy in terms of their sentiments, but deep down, it's there, and they will demonstrate it in terms of their actions. And so I think that that's really important for people to keep in mind.
I know one of the things you also advocate for is, for those of us who would like to do more, is that there's a lot of organizations out there, of course, that serve veterans. For those who are wanting to maybe do that and take the step to serve veterans through an organization, what's the best way to get started, or to get involved, or even to know what the organizations are out there that we could potentially help with?
Well, I'd be happy to compile a list of the few organizations, various organizations that I know that work with veterans and support veterans, and some of them are veteran-run. And they're always looking for, volunteers, or looking for people to help out with their time or their resources, or whatever it is, to help veterans. So I certainly can compile a list for you that you can share with your audience. And the first step is just to take the first step, and that is to, reach out connect with many of these organizations have websites, and so making that first contact and just inquiring, how can I help? These are the things that I do, and these are my resources, and these are my skills. What do you need from me? How can I help? Can I do? And that's all. And believe me, people are more than happy to get such inquiries and would very much appreciate that. I think it'll be a very rewarding experience, not only for the veterans that would, appreciate whatever it is that you can do or give, but also for that person who's involved in the doing and giving. It's just an extremely rewarding experience for everyone involved.
Well, thank you so much in advance for that list. I really appreciate you being willing to do that. And I absolutely will post it on the show notes for this episode. And of course, for those of you who get the weekly leadership guide, that list will be in this week's guide as well as a good starting point for those of us who do want to do more and to reach out to serve veterans outside the organization as well too. Eugenia, I really appreciate your time, your wisdom. Thank you for sharing your perspective with us. I know that this is going to be really helpful to our audience as well.
All right. Well, thank you, Dave, for the opportunity, and also thank your audience for their listening and for their patience. And if anybody has any questions, they can also reach out to me.
Eugenia Weiss is the co-editor, as she mentioned, of two books, The Civilian Lives of U.S. Veterans, Issues and Identities, and Supporting Veterans in Higher Education, a primer for administrators, faculty, and advisors. Thanks again, Eugenia.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eugenia, and she wasn't kidding about sending over resources. I have a huge list from her to share with you of all the resources and organizations that support veterans, and in addition, a number of other books that'll be helpful to you if this is top of mind, either for you or in your organization. And the best way to get access to that is either to go to the show notes, or you can just look in the weekly leadership guide, because I'm going to be including all of those in this Wednesday's guide for those of you who already receive it. If you don't yet receive the weekly leadership guide, the best way to get access to it is to activate your free membership on the coachingforleaders.com website. Just go to coachingforleaders.com. You'll see right on the main page there. You can set up your free membership. You'll get the weekly leadership guides in addition to a bunch of other things on the website that you can continually access. So thanks again, Eugenia, for all of those resources. I really appreciate it. And I know it's going to help all of us to support our veterans even more successfully. And an additional resource this week is something I mentioned on the very top of the show, and you may have heard about in my audio announcement over the weekend. I am going to be hosting a live free webinar this week at a number of days and times. And the topic is When Expert Leaders Act. Here's what they do. I am going to be reviewing 7 strategies that will make you a better leader in 2017. All of the times and days are going to be live. I will be presenting the webinar personally, and I'm also going to be taking live questions about the Coaching for Leaders Academy applications that are opening tomorrow. That's right, tomorrow, Tuesday, the 17th, 2017, the applications will be opening. And so I'll be answering live questions about that at the very end of the webinar. And there will be options to attend it on Wednesday, the 18th, Thursday, the 19th, and Saturday, the 21st, 2017. And regardless of where you are in the world, you will find a time that will work well for you. And that's so we have a bunch of different options. And if you'd like to claim your free seat on one of those webinars this week, go over to coachingforleaders.com/webinar, and you'll see all of the times and days available. All you need to do is just select the one that works for you, and I'll take it from there with getting you every piece of information you need. It's 1 hour of your time that I think will help you to really be better and more effective as a leader in 2017. So again, go on over to coachingforleaders.com/webinar. And on next week's episode, I am really thrilled to welcome Collins Oseame. He is the managing partner and senior consultant of Shelter Care FM Consult. Collins was recently featured during the opening keynote of the International Facility Management Association's conference in San Diego here in Southern California. And he is going to be teaching us how to prevail over your obstacles. I think you'll find his career journey inspiring and his message powerful in continuing to grow not only personally, but professionally. So Collins, I'm looking forward to talking with you. And thank you this week to John Lockhorst and Mr. Matley for the very kind reviews you left on iTunes. Thank you so much to both of you. I'm grateful for it. If you've been listening to the show for a bit and it's been helpful to you, take a moment to rate or review the show on iTunes. You can go to coachingforleaders.com/iTunes for that. And just a reminder, we do the monthly Q&A shows on the first Monday of every month. The next one's coming up early February. If you'd like to submit a question for the next Q&A show for Bonnie and I to tackle, go over to coachingforleaders.com/feedback. And I look forward to talking with many of you this week on the webinars. Have a great week. Take care.